Two versions. The one everyone sees, and the one only your heart remembers. The one built from faces you never forgot, and goodbyes that never really ended. Some stories don't fade. They wait. In the streets, in the echoes, in the silence between heartbeats. This is the city where we almost stayed. You're watching Soulthread, where every story remembers. She came back on a cold Tuesday, the kind that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. Rain slicked the streets, neon signs flickered like reluctant eyes watching her, and the asphalt gleamed under the glow of traffic lights. It wasn't meant to be permanent, just a few months, one assignment, but something inside her insisted she stay. The train station smelled of damp leather and exhaust. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, feeling the chill pierce through her gloves. Around her, the city moved without acknowledging her, but she could feel its pulse, the invisible thread connecting millions of strangers who brushed past without noticing. Her first stop was the cafe near the corner of 42nd, the one she used to haunt on quiet afternoons. The warm aroma of coffee and baked bread wrapped around her like a memory she couldn't place. The barista glanced at her, polite but unknowing, and she didn't mind. She ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no conversation. Then she saw him. Not directly, just a flash, a shadow in the reflection of the rain-streaked window. Eli Thorne. Her heart stuttered. He had always been there, always just out of reach, like a note she had forgotten how to read. He wasn't smiling, not yet, but the world seemed to tilt when their eyes met through the glass. She wanted to look away, to pretend he was a ghost conjured by memory, but something held her there. Something fragile and dangerous, like a thin thread stretched taut across a storm. Her apartment was small, cluttered with half-unpacked boxes and lamps casting golden circles of light against gray walls. Rain tapped against the windows in a slow, steady rhythm that seemed to echo the unspoken words in her chest. She dropped her bag and allowed herself to breathe. For a moment, the city, the rain, even Eli Thorne himself could wait. Later, she walked streets she had once known like the back of her hand. Steam curled from grates, taxis honked like nervous birds, and neon signs flickered warnings that she didn't fully understand. She moved past familiar corners, memories twisting around her like smoke, some comforting, some dangerous. The Ember Room was still open when she arrived, its amber light glowing through fogged windows. Eli was behind the bar, polishing a glass with slow, precise movements. "I didn't expect you," he said, calm and measured, his voice like a chord that vibrated in her chest. "I didn't expect to see you," she replied, letting her gaze linger just a second too long. Words felt inadequate. Some stories didn't require them. Memories spoke in their own language, soft, jagged, insistent. She left the bar before they spoke again. The rain had stopped, leaving streets slick and reflective. A single street lamp illuminated a puddle that mirrored her reflection. She paused, watching her face ripple and fracture with the water's surface. Some part of her wondered if she was returning to the city, or to herself. Somewhere between the echo of footsteps and the distant hum of traffic, she realized one thing. The city had a way of holding on to people. Not gently, not kindly, but firmly, like a story refusing to end. And in the silence, she understood the truth she had been avoiding. The threads of the past were never fully severed. They wove themselves into the present and sometimes waited just long enough to pull you back. The next morning, the city woke reluctantly, shrouded in mist and the low hum of early traffic. Daven stood at her window, watching the streets glisten under a pale, hesitant sun. She wrapped her hands around a mug of coffee, feeling its warmth seep into her fingers. Outside, life was moving on without her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the city itself remembered her. Her apartment felt smaller now, the shadows longer, the silence heavier. Memories began to seep into her consciousness, uninvited and relentless. She remembered afternoons spent wandering these streets, the laughter that used to echo from corners, the faint smell of rain on asphalt that always followed Eli's presence. She tried to push it away. The assignment. A new beginning. But the past has a way of pressing itself into the present, demanding acknowledgement. She left the apartment, letting the city swallow her. The streets were quieter this early, though the familiar sounds, footsteps, distant horns, the metallic clatter of construction, were still there, like a heartbeat beneath the surface. She passed the cafe again, but didn't go inside. Memories of her last encounter with Eli flared sharply, forcing her gaze to flick elsewhere. It was impossible not to notice him. Eli Thorne appeared across the street, leaning against the corner brick of an old bookstore, his posture casual, yet every inch of him radiated awareness. Their eyes met again, and this time, it was harder to look away. He raised a hand in a subtle greeting, almost polite, almost detached, but it carried weight she couldn't ignore. Iris's mind drifted back to their shared past. How many nights had they spent walking these streets, talking about everything and nothing? How many times had she felt that pull, the invisible thread that tied them together? And yet, there had always been distance, invisible barriers neither had fully explained. She hurried past him, keeping her eyes ahead, though every instinct screamed at her to stop, to turn, to confront the ache in her chest. By the time she reached her office building, she was aware of every shadow, every flicker of movement. The city felt alive and watchful, waiting to see what she would do next. Inside, the fluorescent lights and hushed conversations of colleagues felt alien. She went through the motions, emails, meetings, the dull rhythm of professional life, but her thoughts kept drifting back. Eli. The streets. The shadows in the cafe window. The city that remembered. By evening, she found herself at the Ember Room again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She pushed the door open, letting the warm amber light wash over her. Eli looked up from a ledger, his expression unreadable. "You came back," he said, his voice carrying both accusation and relief, though he tried to hide either. "I did," she replied softly, letting herself study him. Lines she didn't remember were now etched on his face. Shadows under his eyes told stories she hadn't been present for. And yet, he was the same Eli, the one who had haunted her memories, the one who had pulled at her like gravity. They didn't speak much. Some conversations were unnecessary. Their shared silence carried the weight of old secrets and unspoken questions. Later, walking back through the rain-slick streets, Iris realized that returning wasn't just about a temporary assignment anymore. It was about confronting what she had left behind, facing the memories that refused to stay buried, and answering the silent questions the city itself seemed to ask. Who are you now? And who will you become if the past finds you? Somewhere in the echoes of the past, Iris felt the first true stirrings of understanding. She hadn't just come back to the city, she had come back to the story that had always belonged to her, the story that had waited, patient and relentless, to be told again. The city had a way of revealing itself in layers, sometimes gentle, sometimes brutal. Iris felt it as she walked past the glowing windows of closed shops, the occasional figure hurriedly passing through puddle-streaked streets. Every corner whispered fragments of the past, and with every step, her memories tangled tighter with the present. Eli was impossible to avoid. That night, as she returned from her apartment, she found the Ember Room alive with low murmurs and the scent of bourbon and charred oak. He was behind the bar, polishing a glass with the same precise, deliberate care that had always unnerved her. "You're persistent," he said without looking up, as if he already knew her intentions. "And you're predictable," she replied, letting her eyes scan the room. The bar was empty enough to feel intimate, yet crowded enough to hide secrets. He finally looked at her, a slow smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I didn't expect you to come back this quickly." "Expectations are dangerous," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the soft jazz playing in the background. The air between them carried years of tension, unspoken words, lost opportunities, memories of moments that could have been more. Eli slid a drink toward her, a whiskey neat, the amber liquid catching the light like molten gold. She hesitated, then took it. They spoke of nothing and everything. A conversation danced around the edges of their shared past, hints of old betrayals, long nights spent in conversation, laughter now echoing like ghosts. She realized how much she had missed this, the silent understanding between them, the way the city seemed to bend around their presence. Then the past pressed harder. A name, a place, a memory, small things that brought tension to the surface. A colleague who had once betrayed her trust, a street where they had argued and laughed in equal measure. The city was no longer just a backdrop, it was an active participant, weaving its influence through every action, every glance. Eli leaned closer, voice low and careful. "You never really left, did you?" Iris felt the weight of those words settle in her chest. "I tried," she admitted. "But some things, some people, they follow you whether you want them to or not." They left the bar together. The streets were wet, reflecting the city lights in fractured mosaics. The tension between them was no longer subtle. It was alive, pulsing, a thread pulled tight by everything left unsaid. They walked in silence, yet the silence was not empty. It was a dialogue written in footsteps, in the tilt of her head, in the way his gaze lingered just long enough to matter. At an old bridge spanning the river, they stopped. Water flowed below, reflecting the city's fractured light. Eli turned to her. "The city, it hasn't forgiven us," he said quietly. "But maybe we can." Iris looked down at the water, feeling the past and present collide in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying. She knew the threads were tangled, that the choices they had made, and avoided, had consequences. But for the first time since she arrived, she felt a dangerous, thrilling clarity. Some stories don't stay buried. Some threads, no matter how fragile or frayed, find their way back to the hands that created them. And now Iris and Eli were holding theirs again. The city watched them, alive and patient, as if waiting to see whether the story would unravel or finally come together. The city seemed sharper at dawn, edges slicing through the morning mist as if it wanted to remind her who was really in control. Iris moved through streets that now felt less like home and more like a stage set for truths she had long ignored. Every reflection in a puddle, every window, whispered secrets she didn't want to hear, but couldn't resist. Her apartment no longer felt safe. The walls seemed thinner, the shadows longer, and her memories, once locked away, now clawed through every corner. She found herself touching the objects she had left behind months ago. An old journal, a photograph of the skyline, a half-finished painting. Each held a fragment of her past, a piece of herself she hadn't dared to face. Eli appeared again that evening, waiting at the Ember Room like he had rehearsed it for months. His calm composure now felt like a challenge. "You're avoiding something," he said, voice steady, but the intensity in his eyes betrayed him. "I'm not avoiding," Iris replied, her words sharper than intended. "I'm just trying to understand." He set a drink in front of her, amber liquid catching the dim light. "Understand what?" "The past," she whispered almost to herself, "and why it keeps showing up." He leaned closer, his presence magnetic, inescapable. "Because the past never leaves, Iris. It waits. It grows. And eventually, it finds a way to demand your attention." Their conversations spiraled into memories, arguments in rain-drenched streets, laughter that had turned to silence, promises that had unraveled. Each word tugged at the fragile tension between them, making the room feel smaller, the air thicker. A sudden sound, a raised voice from a nearby alley, made them both tense. The city had a way of reminding you it was alive, that danger and revelation were often intertwined. Eli's hand brushed against hers as they moved toward the source. It was a minor confrontation, a local dispute, nothing significant, but it left a lingering adrenaline that mirrored the emotions between them. Back at the bar, Eli finally spoke what neither had dared to say before. "There are things you don't know. Things you weren't told. I wanted to protect you, but maybe I was wrong." Iris felt her chest tighten. "Protect me from what?" He looked away, as if the weight of truth was heavier than his words could carry. "From the consequences of choices we made, and the people who never forgot them." For the first time, she realized that their reunion was not just a chance encounter. It was inevitable. Every thread of their past, every shadow of their decisions, had led them here. And now, the city itself seemed to watch them, waiting to see which of them would falter first. As she left that night, walking through streets that shimmered wet and fractured under the neon glow, Iris understood that returning had been a mistake, or perhaps the only right decision she could have made. The past was no longer a memory. It was a living, breathing force, demanding answers, demanding reckoning. And she would have to face it all. The rain fell again that night, heavier than before, drumming on rooftops like a warning. The streets glistened with reflections of neon signs, fractured like memories too sharp to hold. Iris Daven moved through them deliberately, each step a pulse of anticipation and dread. She knew tonight would change everything. The Ember Room glowed faintly ahead, warm amber light cutting through the storm. Inside, the air smelled of whiskey, smoke, and secrets. Eli was already there, waiting as though he had been expecting her since the moment she arrived back in the city. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his posture betrayed him. "You're late," he said softly, though his eyes never left hers. "I needed to think," she replied. "Needed to be sure I could face it all." Eli's gaze softened, just for a fraction of a second, before returning to the guarded intensity that had always kept her on edge. Face what? Her fingers trembled slightly as she set her bag down. The past. Everything we left behind. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating, until Eli finally gestured to the corner of the bar where a single envelope waited. "This changes everything," he said. "You need to see it for yourself." Iris opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, letters, fragments of a story she had thought was buried forever. Faces she had trusted, decisions she had never understood, and a truth so sharp it cut through the fragile calm she had maintained since her return. "You knew?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. "I tried to protect you," he admitted. "I kept the pieces from you because I thought it would make it easier. But the truth doesn't care about our comfort." Her chest ached with the weight of betrayal and understanding. "Why now? Why show me this now?" "Because it's always been waiting," Eli said. "And because we can't move forward until we face it together." They left the bar together, the city's rain-slick streets reflecting the chaos of emotions between them. Each step was heavy with the gravity of past choices and unspoken truths. At the bridge where the water ran dark and reflective, Eli finally turned to her. "You have a choice," he said. "Walk away and pretend none of this matters, or stay and face everything with me." Iris felt the threads of her past and present intertwine, pulling her toward a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Every memory, every regret, every shadow of what could have been converged into one undeniable truth. She belonged here, in this city, in this story, at this moment. "I stay," she said, voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Eli nodded, a mixture of relief and uncertainty crossing his face. Together, they stood on the bridge, the city alive around them, the rain washing over them like a baptism. For the first time since she returned, Iris felt clarity, a fierce, dangerous clarity. Some stories don't end neatly. Some threads are frayed, tangled, and impossible to separate. But for Iris and Eli, for this city, the past and present had collided in a way that could no longer be ignored. And in that collision, they found something rare, the possibility of beginning again. The city was quieter now, softer somehow, as if it had exhaled after the storm. Rain had given way to mist, and the streets shimmered under the pale light of early morning. Iris walked through them slowly, letting the echoes of the past settle around her like a gentle fog. She paused at familiar corners, the cafe, the bookstore, the bridge where decisions had been made and truths confronted. Each place carried its own memory, each shadow a fragment of a story that had shaped her. Yet now, those memories felt less like chains and more like threads weaving a tapestry she was finally beginning to understand. Eli walked beside her, quiet and steady. No words were necessary. The silence between them was comfortable, intimate, and whole. They didn't need to fill it with promises or explanations. The past had been faced, and the present stretched before them, uncertain but brimming with possibility. Iris thought of the choices she had avoided, the mistakes she had tried to forget, and the moments she had once wished to erase. They were all here, but they no longer held power over her. She had returned not just to the city, but to herself, to the story that had always belonged to her. At the Ember Room later that day, they shared a quiet drink, watching the amber light reflect on the polished bar. Outside, the city pulsed with life, indifferent and alive. But inside, there was a sense of peace, fragile yet real. "Do you ever wonder," Eli said softly, "if we would have found this, if we had stayed away?" Iris smiled faintly, thinking of all the roads they had walked separately, all the threads that had pulled them back together. "Some things aren't meant to be avoided," she replied. "Some threads, they find you no matter what." The rain returned later that evening, a gentle drizzle tapping against the windows. It reminded her that the city never really slept. It only paused to breathe, to remember, and to let the stories unfold. Some voices never fade because they were never meant to. Some stories wait patiently for the right hands, the right hearts, to tell them fully. And some threads, no matter how frayed, remain, binding, fragile, eternal. Iris and Eli stepped outside into the mist, the city alive around them, the past acknowledged, the future uncertain, and the threads of their lives intertwined. Some stories are endings. Some are beginnings. And this one, Iris knew, was both. Some stories don't end, they simply return home. You've been watching Soulthread, where every story remembers. If this one touched you, like, subscribe and tell us. Where you watching from?